What is financial modeling? Generally, if I ask this question to a large number of people, I get different answers from each one of them. The reason being, the broader definition of the financial modeling is not understood by many of the people. To put it simple, financial modeling is nothing but creating a reusable model which will take some inputs, does some processing, and gives some output on any finance specific data. So we can use this model for various purposes depending on how comfortable are we in terms of segregating the inputs from the calculations to the outputs. This is what, if I use it for any financial concept, I call it as financial modeling. But most of the time people try to link financial model with valuing a particular stock or valuing a project, or they try to link financial modeling with more of financial application. The simple way to look at financial modeling is any concept of finance. It could be investments, valuations, derivatives, risk management, any concept of finance. If I am able to create a model like this, which takes various inputs, does some processing and generates the outputs, and probably it should also give me, if at all I modify these inputs with something else, the calculations need to be automatically updated and appropriate outputs be generated for me. If at all I am able to create such a kind of a skeleton, and if I am able to generate what if analysis scenarios out of it, I call that kind of product as my financial model. So it can be used for any financial decisions. It could be as simple as a loan calculation model, which will give me the EMIs that I need to pay based on the way I have taken the loan, the time period of it, the amount of loan, the prevailing interest rates, and various other inputs that go into it. Based on all those inputs, if it can generate the EMI which I need to pay, and changing some set of inputs, if the output can get automatically updated, and probably give a comparative analysis between the two sets of inputs, which is better compared to the other. That is what we are calling as a financial model. The word model is a very common word, which is more like something that can be used as a base to do my analysis. And since I am using it for financial applications, I am calling it as a financial model. So just try to understand that specific concept, and even from a theoretical definition of it, it illustrates the relationships so that we can answer the what if analysis questions quite comfortably. So any theory of finance or accounting and the relationship between the various financial entities, if I am able to build them, structure them using the formulas and using the relationships between the various entities, that is what we are calling as a financial model. And to be frank, the financial modeling has become more and more popular with the popularization of a spreadsheet tool. More or less, Microsoft Excel has done wonders in terms of helping us to build these kind of models, because most of the formulas that are present in Excel, they work like building blocks. So they help us in terms of structuring the business algorithms, the financial calculations more easily without the need of any kind of a programming. So even a business analyst can very well create models without knowing any kind of programming, and that is what helps in taking decisions and in doing reporting quite effectively, and that is where the financial modeling has become more and more popular nowadays. So sometimes that's the reason I keep saying financial modeling is more of a spreadsheet game, more of expertise in spreadsheeting compared to expertise in finance. Of course, you do need to know the base finance concepts and all those things, but how well you can translate those finance concepts into the spreadsheet to arrive at dynamicness in the outputs, dynamism in the outputs is what will determine the goodness of the financial model. Alright, with that as the base, let's move forward. Whenever we are trying to build any financial model, all we need to see is, do I have a mechanism which clearly delineates the inputs from the processing to the output? Because this I should think through the design in such a way that all these things which I am calling as inputs, they are bound to change. And to clearly illustrate that, we all have to accept the fact that anything we deal in finance, major things we deal in finance are the assumptions part, which might change in future. I am expecting that the revenues will be growing at 7% for the next 5 years. It may so happen that for first 2 years they have grown at 7, but in the third year they have grown at 10, or some other expectation might come because of the economy up or down or various reasons. So if our assumptions are changing, I should know what is the updated value of my model, or what is the updated value of my project. Is it still profitable or not? So if at all I have to achieve that, there need to be a clear-cut delineation between what I think as inputs, or sometimes the financial modeling world calls them as assumptions. Whatever is bound to change in future, all those I am treating as assumptions. So clearly delineating between the inputs, understand what are all the key value drivers for our project. Value drivers could be probably a revenue growth, expense fall, or the interest rates going down. Various factors could typically add value to our project. So identifying all the key value drivers. And the other important thing in any good financial modeling exercise is create separate modules for various components. So if my project involves a construction phase, an operations phase, and probably a transfer phase, and many other things in the middle, for each phase, or for that matter in each phase again, if there are 3-4 sub projects, try to create separate modules for each one of them. Means as far as the spreadsheet is concerned, try to maintain separately all this information, and at the end we end up finding out the value of the particular project, which means identifying the value of the project is very much possible if we are able to compute the cash flows that are expected out of that project in the future, the various cash flows that are expected out of the project in future. So generally, to determine the cash flows that are expected out of the project, probably we may prepare a forecasted balance sheet or a forecasted P&L statement for the future, which can help us in trying to compute the cash flows for that particular project also, and how well we are able to present the result. The output presentation part of the output is also an important aspect of building a clear-cut financial model. So these are some of the important things that have to be kept in mind before we get started. So it's more of a process, it's more of an attitude, it's more of a behavior rather than any kind of knowledge associated with finance. Make sure that your financial model is very simple. It clearly conveys all the assumptions and conclusions, because probably people should be able to play around with the model, change certain inputs in the model to observe the impact on the output. So they should be having all kinds of flexibilities to work around with the model. So you have to make sure, along with the simplicity, there is a robustness and all the assumptions are collated at one place. You can't build your own assumptions relating to construction somewhere else and relating to operations somewhere else. That will create kind of confusion in the users. So it's better that all assumptions are captured clearly and easily available to the users, and make sure that you provide adequate opportunity for sensitivity analysis, scenario analysis. Sensitivity analysis is primarily change one input and observe what kind of impact it gets on the output. Keep all other inputs constant, change one input and observe the output. That is what we call as sensitivity analysis. When I say scenario analysis, you change multiple inputs together, because one input, if one input change, probably all others may not be constant in the real world. So as per the real world scenario, if one input is changing, make appropriate changes in the other inputs also, and then try to observe the outputs. And that is what we are calling as scenario analysis. Generally people use the words like optimistic scenario, pessimistic scenario, most likely scenario, some of the common words that are used in the scenario analysis space. Or sometimes you can even look at break-even analysis, wherein you are typically looking at what should be the minimum number of years to where my cash inflows are more than the cash outflows. You can use various ways in which you can define your break-even analysis, but your financial model should be comfortable in terms of explaining all these things quite comfortably. Alright? And some of the key things which every modeler should keep in mind as some of the good practices of financial modeling. So some of the things, as I have already highlighted, divide the entire model, plan for your separate modules, beginning with the input section. Probably the input section itself can be divided into 2 or 3 sheets. Okay, construction related assumptions, or probably macroeconomic related assumptions, revenue and expense related assumptions. Depending on how complex the project is, the input sheets itself could be more than one. Or sometimes people even use one-time input versus time series inputs. Time series inputs are more like every year the percentage change could be different. Probably like inflation. For the next 10 years, either I can take one constant percentage as my assumption, or probably I may say the next 1-2 years, 5, 6, 7, 3, 4, 7, 3, like that I can take different numbers for different years. Wherever I am taking different numbers for different years, I am calling as time series assumptions, whereas in this case I can take them as one single time assumption. So make sure, give a thought before you actually get into the building of the model. Divide the model into separate modules. beginning with an input section, and create a separate sheet called working sheet, and provide clear cut calculations regarding all the value drivers which are resulting in revenues, expenses, etc. Create a working module. Don't put all those numbers directly in the financial statement. Let the financial statements which you are preparing be as crisp and as simple as possible. Only let the most important thing that needs to be conveyed be present as a part of financial statements. Any workout to arrive at those values, let them be there as a part of the working module. And understand where the model is starting, what is the starting point of the model, and clearly define the time period of the model. Right? Is it phase 1 of the model, phase 2 of the model? What is the time period? From what time to what time the construction period is? What time to what time is the operations period? Something like that. You clearly define that, and work through each and every balance sheet item, P&L item. How would you fill these things based on your project inputs, and wherever a detailed workout is required, especially for depreciation or for tax calculations or for debt related stuff or for working capital related stuff, wherever detailed calculations are required, probably put them as separate modules. Do a detailed calculation on each of them, especially depreciation, tax, cash flows, all these things. You create separate modules and then bring the summary of those modules or sheets into the main financial statements. And don't use too much of macros. Sometimes this is a very common thing I get across when I talk about financial modeling. Do we need to learn macros? The more and more macros and VBA code you put into the sheet, there comes a lot of restrictions, there comes a lot of security issues. All these things will create, though your model becomes more and more automated, but some kind of limitation also comes to the model. And try to avoid the circular references. When we deal with our examples also, we'll try to see wherever the circular references are coming, to whatever extent you can reduce those circular references in Excel, try to avoid and try to resolve them quite comfortably. And try to do an audit on the financial model by trying to change as many inputs as possible. And make sure that the output model should be the end. Again, the output, the values in the output, make sure whatever is your output, they are not again used as input anywhere inside your model. Any change to that output, again iteratively, it should not impact the outputs and go in a continuous loop. Make sure whatever you are putting as a part of your output module is the final, and it is presented by taking the calculations from the input as well as the relevant calculations. And especially because we use multiple spreadsheets, we have to make sure that the columns that are used in the spreadsheet are consistent. Probably if I am doing year 1 to year 10 in B column to K column, let's say for construction assumptions, make sure that for profit and loss statement as well as balance sheet, the year 1 to year 10 are depicted in B to K columns itself. That will create some kind of consistency when someone is going through your model, and even when you are referring to your model at a later date, even that kind of clarity can come quite comfortably. And include a dashboard at the top of it, each model, wherever you are able to create one model. Make sure that you create a kind of a simplified dashboard which will summarize the model, especially when you are using more complex calculations and formulas. Make sure that a small dashboard will satisfy all that is required, all the outputs that are coming out of the model. Keep the formulas as simple as possible, but at the same time they need to be robust also. They should try to address as much of error checks, as well as they need to address as many combinations of inputs as possible. They should not break down the moment you change the input. So simple as well as robust, these two things should be satisfied parallelly for any good model. And some kind of conventions with respect to positive numbers, negative numbers, with some specific red kind of conventions, or such kind of brackets and red kind of conventions. Some such kind of formatting conventions are good to use as a part of a good financial model, right? So these are all nothing to do with finance. These are all nothing to do with your knowledge on the subject. These are more of a practice. These are more of the spreadsheet related processes to make sure that whatever the concepts and the knowledge of finance you have, you are translating it into a usable application. All right.